Welcome to our free webinar. We'll begin shortly. Thank you for your promptness. Some additional persons joining, just giving them some time. Yes. All right, so we're going to start things in a few minutes. We're going to start in the next 2 minutes. All right, in the next 60 seconds, we'll go. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this particular venture this morning. Welcome to Global Health Sales. Today we are going to be exploring Why is it that you might be losing sales, and just look at strategies in which you can introduce immediately to plug that hole. So my name is Garett Elliott. I'm the CEO at Global Edge Sales Solutions, and it is my pleasure to share with you today, this morning. I hope that you will be able to digest some of these strategies and that you'll be able to implement right after this session. All right, see some persons still coming on, but we will proceed. All right, thank you so much for joining. Welcome to Global Edge Sales. We will now proceed to look at why you're losing sales and just how to fix it, right? I know a lot of us might have some solutions in the back of our minds, and there might be strategies that you would have been employing to try and see why is it that I'm currently losing sales and how is it that I can fix it. And I want to just put out a disclaimer. So most of the strategies that I'll be discussing in this presentation will be from the point of view of business to business sales. Of course, it can be adjusted to business to customer or other kinds of engagement, but the main focus here is business to business. So this morning we will explore the what. What are those things? What are those things that is causing the breakage in your sales? And we are going to be looking at when those things are happening and also why they are happening. All right. So just indulge me for a few as we get into the nooks of the matter. So you might be asking the question, who is Global Edge? Well, Global Edge is Caribbean's premier sales transformation partner. So we are here to disrupt the market, right? So we are not just offering training courses. We are also intertwining technology in what we are doing. So currently we have 5 bespoke courses. We have one course, the $1 Million Mindset, which we'll be talking about earlier. We have a public relation course that we'll be talking about as well. There's our customer service course that we offer, and there's our $1 Million Sales Manager course, which is a part of our offering as well. And in the midst of all that, there's technology that we employ, so we can implement CRM solutions, and we can also introduce assessment of your current sales team. And with that, we can also look at hiring sales individuals or coming to your organization and assess the skill sets that your current team members have, and just look at specific training that we can focus on to ensure that we are focusing on the right skill sets to maximize your spend in training. All right. Now, my name, as I said earlier, for those who might be late, my name is Garett Elliott, and I've been in sales leadership for over 15 years. I've worked with many companies delivering billions of dollars in revenues on an annual basis and breaking records, setting new ones, all of that, right? On top of that, I've been doing public speaking for over 30 years, and not only have I gathered that kind of experience, but I've taken the time to sharpen my skills by going back to school and studying business and corporate communication, and also blending that with a master's in business administration. All right, so let's get into the meat of the matter. The silent killer number one, why you might be losing sales, is the vague value, right? And what are we talking about when we talk about the vague value? The vague value, when we're talking about this, is you are not being specific about the contribution or the solution that your product solves. So it is said that 68% of buyers say most sales presentations fail to demonstrate a measurable return on investment, right? Because only 1 in 4 reps link their product to the customer's financial or operational results, which is very critical. So it's not about the features, it's not about all the good things that the product can do, it's about how will it change the circumstances surrounding the company. So one of the common signs of vague value is often you get the feedback, after your presentation, let me think about it, right? That might be one of the things that is indicating that your presentation did not address the needs. It did not address the needs of the client, but instead you focus more on features, right? Another to look at is you deliver a great pitch, right? So your feedback is that you deliver a great pitch, but no decision follows. So they ghost you, you can't get through to anybody because you did not address the specific needs of the organization, right? Another feedback you'll often get is that your products sound good, but it's not different because all you focus on was the features. But we're not just going to talk about the vague value and the common sense, but we're going to look at how to fix that. Now, let us look at the value formula, right? The value formula has the features, benefit, outcome, and impact, right? And you might ask me, how do I put this all together? How do I make it work, right? So when you're putting together your presentation, you have to focus on, of course, the features, but you don't allow it to stay at the features. You have to show the benefits to the organization or the individual. You have to show the outcome, and you have to subsequently demonstrate the impact it will have on the bottom line of the company, and that's how you pull in your clients. So for example, how we could apply this formula is in a sentence like this, right? Our platform automates reporting. So you're speaking about the feature, right? It saves your team 10 hours weekly. That's the benefit. And it means faster client delivery, which is your outcome, right? And then you can talk about the average savings, which is, in this case, we're projecting 200,000 annual savings. That's the impact, that's the punchline, and that's the thing that you have to focus on, because your features, you have to convert it to the benefits, the outcome, and the eventual impact that it will have on the organization. Because remember now, your value is not vivid. Your customer won't feel the cost of doing anything, right? So you have to make sure that they feel the value, right, of your product that you're offering or the service that you're offering, so that they will feel the impact of not engaging in your service. All right? Now, let's move on. So we talk about the vague value. Now, let's look at the shallow discovery, which is very, very critical. Because some of us as salespeople, we walk into an organization and we believe that we know everything, that we know how this works, we can solve every problem there is, and because of that, we don't necessarily take the time to do a deep discovery. And because we don't do discovery very well, it means that at the end of our presentation, we would not have addressed the needs of the client that we are trying to engage. The statistic shows that 80% of salespeople lose deals because they fail to align with the customer's true needs, right? And so this is where the top performers separate themselves now. They spend twice as long in discovery as average reps. So every week discovery creates a week close, and it is that simple, right? Now you ask a question, why does it happen, right? The pressure to pitch early, right? So you have a customer, you want to deliver, you want to go back to your sales meeting and report something, and then there's also the fear of the uncomfortable or the deep questions, right? Which is something that we will delve deeper into, because the questions that you're asking will determine the understanding that you have of the client needs, right? And of course, I spoke about it earlier. There's also overconfidence, right? So you walk in there as a sales superstar, and you forget that every client is different, and it is critical that you are understanding their needs so that you can come together with a solution that solves their needs. Now, in order to address the shallow discovery, we can use a 3-layer probe framework to address that, right? So you're not just asking questions such as what or surface level questions. What you're asking is why and what next. Therefore, the context matters, right? You have to delve deep within context when you're engaging your client. So you have to ask questions such as, walk me through how you're currently handling this. What that is going to do is that it will give you insights into the client's process and environment, right? So you have to ask context questions. You have to ask cost questions. What is this issue costing your team each month or quarter? And this will reveal the financial or emotional pain that the organization is experiencing. And then you have to ask consequential question. If this doesn't change this quarter, what's at risk, right? Because now that is going to emerge some kind of urgency and the motivation to act, which you can always use as your channel to get the deal closed. So every layer uncovers deeper truth, right? The goal isn't more questions, it's better questions, right? Better questions that will move the buyer emotionally and financially towards action, right? That is very, very critical. So the three-layer probe framework is structured in such a way that you will get insight, so that when you're putting together your proposal, it will be structured in a way in which you're addressing the needs of the customers, and you're not falling pride to just shallow discovery in which you're putting forward a proposal that does not address any of the pain points of the customer. Now let's move on to silent killer number 3, right? Which is a very weak closing architecture. So imagine doing all the prospecting, getting in front of the client, but then there's a missing stairs, so you cannot walk up those steps because there is a weak closing architecture. So there's no structure in your closing, right? And the data supports it. The data says that 64% of proposals are never followed up on, not because the buyer is not interested, but because the salesperson doesn't create a structured momentum, right? Structure is critical. So closing is not a single event, it is a sequence of micro commitments that lead naturally to the final yes, right? And we're going to be going into what some of those micro commitments look like. So this is what weak closing looks like, right? So the conversation ends with, all right, I'll send over the proposal. No, confirm next week. So there's no scheduled follow-up. There's no urgency. There's no commitment that you have gotten from the customer, but just playing it by ear, and okay, any excuse you get from the customer, you accept it, and you're not managing the conversation, right? And because of that, then it limits your ability to close, because you're allowing the customer to dictate the conversation and the sales process. All right, so this is important, because it's one thing to acknowledge what's happening, but you also need to understand why it is happening, right? So it happens because a lot of individuals, a lot of sales reps, you know, there's the fear of sounding pushy or desperate. Well, you're kind of in the wrong profession if you don't know how to be pushy or desperate, and not in a way that pushes away your customer, but in a way that, you know, gets them to recognize that you're serious about business, right? It also happens because there's an over-reliance on charm or product knowledge instead of structure, right? And that word structure keeps coming up because it is critical, right? Very, very critical. And then there's the unclear understanding of the buyer's internal decision process. Remember that we talked about the probity earlier in terms of understanding the environment, understanding the decision-making process inside the customer's environment, understanding the pain points. All of that is critical. And finally, there is the lack of closing discipline, hoping interest equals to intent. So you get an interest from the customer, but there's no discipline, there's no structure to ensure that it is closed. You're hoping that the customer is so overwhelmed or in awe of what you're offering such that they will just go ahead and purchase. But it doesn't always work that way. If you're going to be a high performance sales individual, you have to have structure in your closing. Now, this is how we address a situation like this, right? the call to action ladder framework, right? The call to action ladder framework, right? So what this does, it ensures that there's confidence, clarity, and control in your closing framework. And this works, and of course we can go deeper. This is just a 1 hour session, so we can't go in depth with a lot of things because there's depths in which you can take this. But it is a 3 ladder framework, right? At the first ladder, you're talking about the micro acts. So you're engaging a client, right? What you want to do is to ensure that you're securing small agreements early, right? So you can do simple things like ask a question. Can we outline your internal approval process together? What is that question going to do, right? You're going to get a yes from the customer from very early without making any huge commitment, right? And what that will allow you to do is to get an understanding of the processes that your proposal needs to walk through in order for you to get a yes, right? Which is very critical, right? Then there's the mid-level acts, right? So you want to create next step structure, right? So you can ask, let's set a review meeting for Thursday to finalize details. This is very critical, right? So you're not coming off that call until you have a timeline for the next meeting to finalize the move forward, right? Very important. And then now the macro acts, because you've done well with the micro acts, you've done well with the mid acts. Now you have now gotten the client in a position where they are more open. The probability is greater that they will say yes to your micro acts. Because at the micro level, what you're doing now is that you're inviting the customer to make a decision, and they're now in a better position to do so more confidently. So it sounds like this aligns perfectly with your goals. Are you ready to move forward today? That's one of the ways you can close the deal, right? That's one of the questions you can ask to move forward with the deal. And don't, as salespeople, we have to ask for the business, right? It's not just going to fall in your lap. So the customer will be willing to engage you in your proposal, in your discussion, your presentation, your conferences. But at the end of it all, you have to ask for the business. And here's a little a nugget behind it all. Because every yes, right, releases dopamine, right? Small commitments build comfort and reduce resistance. So by the time you reach a big ask, the buyer's brain is already feeling comfortable and safe that this is the right solution for my business. So there's signs to what we are discussing here. So this is what I want you to do to address your close if you're struggling with close, right? If you're struggling with closing before your next sales call, plan your closing ladder in advance, right? So have your micro asks, have your mid asks, and have your macro asks all set up, so you know exactly what you're going to do on this call, and so that you're structured and you're not caught off guard by the client dictating what the conversation should be or where the conversation is going, right? So write it out and prepare, because guess what, guys? Closing isn't pressure, it's precision. The best closers don't chase decisions, they design them. Always remember that. All right, and so the next reason why you might be losing sales is what we call the single thread dependence, right? So you've reached out to the prospect, you've reached out to the potential customer, and what you've done is that you've found yourself through the gateway, you found your ways through the persons who have been blocking you getting through, and you have a connection. Great. But that's not the end, because what happens to a lot of salespeople is that they get one contact information and they never probe further to see who else would be involved in the decision-making process. So for example, this individual moves on, you don't have any contact. This individual now is your only dependent in the organization to give you updates and to be the champion in the organization. it is not a smart move. Right? So, some of the consequences of just focusing on one contact person in the organization is that you'll hear from that one contact that I just need to get approval. But because you did not probe, you don't even know who they are supposed to be getting approval from. Right? So you're sitting there waiting for weeks for feedback, and I mean, you could have gotten that in one meeting if you all knew all the decision makers, or you could just have a meeting with all of the decision makers so that you can move forward with the decision making process. Right? You might be in a situation where your proposal gets stuck in review with no visibility because you are only depending on one champion in the organization. Right? Not good. Not good at all. So this is the fix. Let us use a multi-thread mapping scenario, right? Because there's strength in numbers, right? Every strong deal has three types of advocates. There's the economic buyer, right? That is the person who controls the money, right? You need to get that person on your side. You need to explain the economic returns, the ROI, to that individual, right? And you have to speak their language, right? So when you're putting together your presentation has to be addressing the economic buyer, the user champion, and the risk manager. And in that, you're putting language that will speak to all of them so that all of them will see through their own glass, perceptive glass, the reason why this solution is the best for the organization. Use that, and trust me, you will close far greater than you're doing right now. Speak the language of the decision makers. And finally, the last reason why that I'll address in this webinar is the no post-close system, right? So you do all of the hard work, you got your presentation, you got the deal that the customer might have even purchased from you. But at the point of passing now the baton, you're dropping the baton. In other words, you're giving up precious revenue because your post-close system is very weak or non-existent. And this is why a post-close system is important. 70% of customers say they have stopped doing business with a company because they felt ignored after the sale, right? You see that? And acquiring a new customer, I mean, we hear this a lot of time, costs 5 to 7 times more than keeping the existing one. And so I ask the question, why is it that as salespeople we don't have any post-close system? Right? Why is it that we are not following through, checking in? Was the delivery done? How was the product? How was the service? Getting feedbacks, etc. It is a very critical part of the process. All right. So what does such a system look like? Right? Because of in your current state of having no onboarding, no post-sale system, what happens now is that there's no onboarding plan, right? The client have to chase you for updates. You can imagine somebody paid millions waiting for a delivery weeks upon weeks and sometimes months upon months, and there's no follow-through from your side. The customer is going to be experiencing buyer's remorse, right? And we all go through it in our own personal lives. So why is it that we are extending it to our clients? It's not a good feeling, right? So when you only reach out when it's time to sell again, the customers are going to feel used, and they are going to go to somebody that they have relationship with, that remembers their birthday, that remembers their anniversary, that remembers that it is Mother's Day, that remember that it is their day that they're getting promoted, that understands that they're working towards a promotion, and therefore this solution is a step towards them getting that promotion. All those things makes the world of a difference, right? And so we need a post-close system that is strong enough to get us referrals, because your salary, your commission, your sales income can multiply if you can allow your current customers to be the champion for you. And of course, like we've always done, you ask why persons would not have a close strategy, a post-close strategy. Because as salespeople, most time we're caught up in new deal. And I need to find the next customer, and we forget. So the moment that we've sold to this customer, we forget the principles, of building relationship, of business development and making the customer happy. And we're focused on the engaging and the hunt all the time, right? And also, whether from an organizational level or from our own structure as individual reps, there's a lack of clear client success process, right? So you don't sit and meet with the client, you don't get feedback after, etc. And all of that contributes to you losing a lot of revenue because you did not nurture the current customer that you have. Now, how do you overcome this, right? You can use the 30, 60, 90 follow-through plan, right? And basically what this is within 30 days of the customer coming on board, making their first purchase, you are sending them personalized thank you messages. You're checking in on them to see, hey, what's going on in terms of your order, how were the products, if it is a product, what's the continued feedback, if it is a service. So within that first 30 days, you're following through and you're calling, and you're not just necessarily trying to sell. You're pretty much just trying to understand from the client's perspective how the service was, and at that point, if there's anything that is not welcome or anything that they're not happy with, that you can address it, and so that they can be repeat buyers, right? Now in the 30-60 windows, 31 to 60 days window, you want to measure and add value, right? So if they purchase an equipment, you can call them to share certain insights in how they can maximize the use of that equipment. You can share certain best practices, etc. So you're not trying to sell them anything, you're just trying to add value, right? And in the 61 to 90 days, you want to reach out to them and, based on what the groundwork you would have laid through the sales process, the follow-up in the 1 to 30 days, the 31 to 60 days, now you're at a place where the customer would be in a happy place to refer you, right, to individuals that might be able to benefit from your service. All right, so we've looked at what is causing you to lose sales. Now let us look at when those things are happening, right? So we're going to look at the timing of the failure, right? So during the prospecting phase, right, we usually want to have a healthy pipeline. That is always preached to us, and we want to make sure that the pipeline is healthy and the figures look good. And so what commonly happens is that we are targeting by volume, right? So because we're targeting by volume and not having structure, what happens is that you end up having weak leads, which equal to wasted time. So you're building up volumes, you're not doing the research properly, you're not qualifying properly, you're just having numbers, which in a sense, you're just wasting time, right? Now, in the discovery phase, right, we address the fact that it is important that you're asking not just surface level questions, because if you're asking surface level questions, you are going to misdiagnose the client's problem. And therefore, you're going to make a presentation that is of non-effect or non-consequential to what the client is trying to achieve. And therefore, you're going to be ghosted. They're going to tell you all sorts of things, and you will never be able to close because you never address the problem in the first place. Then during the presentation phase now, you go and you talk about all of the features of your products, right? And you go in all the technical jargons and what it can do. But you never spoke about the return on investment. You never spoke about the way it will change life for the customer, for the company, and how they will benefit economically from what you're proposing, right? And then in the negotiation phase as well, right? In the negotiation phase, there is the jump to discount too early. So you think that your competitor has offered a better solution, or they might have better prices, and so you start losing confidence in your own proposal. But guess what? If you are negotiating too early, the customer is going to lose confidence and lose trust in what you're proposing, right? And so you have to allow the customer to come to you to provide feedback in terms of costing and them proposing an alternative, and not you jumping the gun and trying to offer a discount which might not be necessary, right? Because not everything is about price, and if you can sell the value that it will have, if you can sell the return on investment, most cases you won't have to negotiate downwards, right? And then in the closing phase, there's no defined next step often, right? And because of that, deals die quietly, right? Because there's no defined next step. So you met with the client, you gave them the proposal, you sat with them, but then you say, all right, I'll hear from you later. And that later never comes, right? Instead, what should be happening is that, okay, who are the persons that needs to be involved in this decision-making process? When would be a good time for all of us to sit and go through and finalize the next step, right? You have to make sure that there are set next steps every time you engage a client, or you're going to be engaged in a sales cycle that is going to enter into perpetuity and you're never ever going to close, right? Then in the post-sale, there's no follow-through, right? And so you lose out on referrals, which can multiply your revenues exponentially, right? If you're able to make your customers happy and continue to follow through even after the sale is made. All right, so you ask the question now, how do I regain control, right? So these are just some of the things you can do to regain control, right? Start strong, right? And what do I mean by starting strong? Pre-frame every interaction, right? So set the agenda and outcome for every call. So don't just take up the phone and call. You have to be structured. What is my objective in making this call? You have to look back at your notes. What was the last discussion? What am I trying to achieve, right? By making this call, and you have to stay structured, right? And sometimes you have to slow down to speed up, right? High performers spend more time in early stages, the research, the preparation, the understanding the client needs so that you can bring applicable solution is critical, right? Control the conversation with them. Don't allow the customer to dictate to you, right? The very good sales rep, what they will do is that they will go into a client's environment. The client will say, hey, I don't want anything right now. But by the time that rep is finished, the customer buys 5 different products because you see the disposition, you're not embracing it, and you're showing them why they need to get additional products, etc. Right? So you have to control the conversation. And critical, keep the micro momentum alive, right? So remember, every interaction should end with a scheduled next step. Don't leave it open, right? And watch for time decay, right? Critical. This is very, very critical. The time decay is very critical because you see, after the first 7 days has passed, your win probability rate drops by 42%, right? So that's why it's important to understand the environment, understand the decision makers, and make sure that you're having everybody that can make the decision and you're in constant dialogue with them. Because the moment it surpasses that 7-day window, your win ratio is already working against you, right? So it's very, very critical that you take back control using these 5 principles. All right, and critical. So we look at the what, we look at the when, and now we are going to be looking at the why, right? Why are we making some of these mistakes, right? We're going to look at the psychological background behind all of these mistakes, right? And one of the very first reasons why we make some of these blunders in sales and we're losing out constantly is the cognitive bias. The cognitive bias speaks to the idea of familiarity, right? So you are familiar with bad practices, unstructured, no structure whatsoever, no follow through, and you have done that for years, and you reasonably get some amount of success. But I'm here to tell you, if you want to take your sales career to the next level, you have to defeat that cognitive bias, and you have to allow yourself to embrace new methodology, sharpening your tool set, because that is the mindset that will get you to the next level. That's why athletes train. That's why athletes commit to continuous improvement. Because you can imagine the athletes that run at World Championship, if they just went home and started drinking beer and Red Bull and partying, and next season they just went back to the track, they will not be able to perform at their best, right? And so we have to ensure that as sales representatives, as business owners, as business managers, that we are sharpening our tools and we are overcoming those things that might be detrimental to the sale, right? And then there's the comfort bias. Some of us have become comfortable with what we are earning. Some of us have become comfortable with where we are. We think that we are the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so because of that, we don't want to push into the place of discomfort, right? And those things allow us to be committing some of these things and to be losing millions in revenue on an annual basis. Then there's the identity basis. Oh, the self-sabotaging thoughts, right? So instead of telling yourself that, hey, I am good enough, I am deserving of more, you think, oh, the market is so hard, this industry is so difficult. No, right? You can do it. You have everything you need to do it, right? All it takes is application, right? And so if you do your research, if you do your follow-throughs, if you apply the principles, then you will be able to knock down those psychological barriers. And of course, there's also the overconfidence bias. So you don't want to not be confident, but you don't want to be overconfident, because the overconfidence now is you walk into every scenario, oh, my product is the best, my product has all the greatest features, and you go into that meeting and instead of listening to the clients, what you're doing is telling them what your product is going to do. You're telling them the solution, and you don't understand their environment, don't understand their pain points, and hence cannot address them. And then you lose the deal and you say to your manager or to your CEO, boy, the competitor gave better pricing. No, it's because you went in overconfident and you never did your proper assessment. So sales is one of the most humbling profession, because at the end of the month, every month, no matter if you were a sales champion at the 31st of July, come the 1st of August, everybody starts from zero again. And so you have to recognize that there needs to be confidence, but you cannot be overconfident, right? This is what this profession requires. Now, it's time to rewire the sales mind, right? And before we can rewire the sales mind, we have to be aware of what are those limiting things, right? So awareness brings us to the point where we recognize what it is that we are doing and what are those things that we need to address in our sales process, our actions, etc., right? Awareness is critical, because if you cannot self-assess or receive good reviews and accept those reviews from those around you that is working with you, then you will be stuck in a old mundane way of operating, and the industry, the market will move on and you will still be in the rut, right? And then it's also critical to reframe some of the things that comes at us. As a sales representative, you're always going to hear no, right? But instead of taking it personal, you can say, in this no, what is it that I'm going to learn from it? Instead of I learned no, I got no, so let me just go home today. I'm not in the mood. No, what did this no teach you? How would you turn this into making more money tomorrow? How would you turn this in making your next call better? And that's how we have to reframe our minds, and instead of absorbing the things that we think not going right, let us turn them into positive things, because the ability to do that will differentiate you from just an ordinary rep carrying home an ordinary salary into an extraordinary one, in which companies will be headhunting you because of your skill set. And of course, you have to reinforce. The practice is important. The continuous improvement is important. And periodically, whether it's on a daily basis, at the end of the week, it is critical that you are reflecting. What were the things that worked this week? What were the things that I could have done better? What were the things that, I learned this week? And so forth. And once you are able to implement these, you will recognize that you are operating eventually on a higher level, which will position you for greater sales. Therefore, when you put together the what, the when, and the why, there are some natural things that will come out, right? Your win rates is going to increase, right? When you had put together all that we've just discussed, your sales cycle would shrink. In other words, instead of taking a year or a year and a half to close some customers, and of course, certain industries, the closing cycle, the sales cycle is longer because of what you're selling, etc. But you can shrink that sales cycle if you are able to address some of the things that we discussed earlier, right? And definitely, one of the tangibles is that the revenue predictability increases, right? So instead of wondering what is going to happen in Q4 because you don't have any clear strategies, you're not aware of what is happening, you're not aware of where you're losing out on sales, what will happen is that no, you'll have a healthy pipeline, you'll have strong referrals, you will be strengthened, and so your revenue will be greater. You'll be in a better position to be able to predict your revenue, which will be so much greater for you as a sales representative. And so we spoke about the what, we spoke about the when, and we spoke about the why. Now, to address the how do you get to that, I packaged that in my $1 Million Sales Sprint course, right? It is in this course that I will delve deeper into some of these concepts that we touched earlier, and we will go into how, right? How you actually implement some of these things, how you actually put them together, and I will go into depth. Of course, some of these things we can't address within an hour session, right? And so the $1 Million Sales Blueprint is set up in such a way where we will be able to go behind the scenes and we'll be able to discover just some of the things that are there and to address how we fix those things, right? So at the end of that course, we'll be able to think, plan, and perform like a top 1% achiever, right? Because we'll master the mindset, systems, and strategies that drive several-figure success, right? What's the construct of this course? The construct of the course is 6 modules, right? Module 1 speaks about the $1 million mindset, right? We look at rewiring how you think about selling and your whole self-worth, because it has to start there, right? Module 2 looks at mastering the sales science, so that is understanding the psychology and the process behind buyer decision. In module 3, we look at building your value arsenal, right? Crafting unique communication methodologies that will get you to success, right? And then the art of connection and influence, critical, right? So turning conversations into commitments is critical. In module 5, we look at the closing architecture, and in module 6, we're looking at building lifelong clients and revenue predictability. So very comprehensive. The course will be covered over a 3-week periods, 6 classes in total, so 6 sessions in total. Right? So what you'll be getting is high-level trading valued at $3,500 US, right? You will be living with a re-engineered mindset, a complete repeatable sales framework, a clear action plan to increase sales in 90 days, and the confidence to lead sales conversation that converts consistently, right? So it's a uniquely packaged, especially for those who want to close out Q4 strongly and to enter Q1 2026 in a strong position with the right mindset, ready to achieve greatness in their sales profession, and stop struggling with just going from paycheck to paycheck, but to knock down the walls and become one of the best in the industry. So registration deadline for the $1 Million Sales Blueprint is on the 28th, right? We will build, so that's on the 28th at 5 o'clock. We will begin our first class that night at 6 p.m., right? All of the sessions will be online. It will be for 3 weeks. And as I said, it will be 2 sessions, so Tuesdays and Thursdays, so 6 sessions in total. And look at the investment. Look at the investment. Just a mere 15,000 Jamaican dollars. And remember the value I told you, over US $3,500. But this is a limited offer. It's next year, of course, it will not be at this price. So this is a limited offer. I encourage you to go on the website at globalhealthsales.com/course, right, and sign up. And I send you additional information on the $1 Million Sales Blueprint. Right, so your next level starts here, right? So you've seen where sales break down and what happens when you fix it. You've learned how the smallest tweaks can cost you millions in missed opportunities. Now the question is simple. What will you do with what you just learned, right? It's time to up your game. It's time to change the trajectory of your sales life. It's time to make history, right? It's time to break new grounds in sales, right? And that's the end of my presentation. You can reach out to us via our phone numbers at 872-6154. You can visit our website at globalhealthsales.com, or you can email us at admin@globalsales.com. And we still have 3 minutes. Any questions, any queries? This is your time. I've spoken for almost an hour. Any questions? Don't be shy, guys. We are confident salespeople. All right, so if there are no questions, I thank you so much for your time. I thank you so much for tuning in. I am looking forward to seeing you in the $1 Million Blueprint course, which will be starting on the 28th of this month. Please register early to secure your spot, of course. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jason. Thank you.